So let's start with, I think we need to start with the media, don't you, Bill?
Yeah, that's fine with me. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, so let's see. Do we start with the New York Times or CNN? Your call.
Let's go to CNN because I have a message of the day just posted on BillO'Reilly.com about Jim Acosta's display yesterday with Sarah Sanders. So if you didn't see it, if your listeners didn't see it, he basically, the CNN chief White House correspondent, word of the day, cajoled Sarah Sanders about Donald Trump's opinion that some journalists are enemies of the people. So Costa was demanding that Ms. Sanders give her opinion about the president's opinion. That's what it came down to.
Is that the role at all of the press secretary?
Of course not.
Yeah.
Press secretary is there, as Ms. Sanders eloquently stated, to reflect what the president says to the press corps so they can report it to the people, not to give her opinion. But what Costa obviously was trying to do is
create
drive a wedge between Sanders and her boss. And he was demanding, not asking, demanding that she give her opinion on the enemy of the people line. So, number one, that was just insane. And I'm sitting there going, what happened to Jim Acosta's bosses at CNN? Where are they? They should have been on the cell phone going, Jim, you better sit down because this is inappropriate and is embarrassing our network. But instead, as we've discussed before, this is the culture and the financial profile of CNN. This is what their people are ordered to do.
Let's play the audio here for anybody who missed it. Here's what Bill's talking about.
I think it would be a good thing if you were to say right here at this briefing that the press, the people who are gathered in this room right now, doing their jobs every day, asking questions of officials like the ones you brought forward earlier, are not the enemy of the people. I think we deserve that.
I think the president has made his position known. I also think it's ironic.
I'm
trying to answer your question.
Okay, well,
I politely waited, and I even called on you despite the fact that you interrupted me while calling on your colleague.
Well,
I said it's ironic.
Which is why I interrupted.
I'm trying.
But if you finish, if you would not mind letting me have a follow-up, that would be fine. But
it's ironic, Jim, that not only you and the media attack the president for his rhetoric when they frequently lower the level of conversation in this country. Repeatedly, the media resorts to personal attacks without any content other than to incite anger. The media has attacked me personally on a number of occasions, including your own network, said I should be harassed as a life sentence, that I should be choked. ICE officials are not welcomed in their place of worship, and personal information is shared on the internet. When I was hosted by the Correspondents Association, of which almost all of you are members of, you brought a comedian up to attack my appearance and call me a traitor to my own gender. In fact, as far as I know, I'm the first press secretary in the history of the United States that's required Secret Service protection. The media continues to ratchet up the verbal assault against the president and everyone in this administration, and certainly we have a role to play, but the media has a role to play for the discourse in this country as well.
And sir, if you don't mind, if I may follow up, excuse me, you did not say in the course of those remarks that you just made that the press is not the enemy of the people.
Unbelievable.
Are we to take it from what you just said? We all get put through the ringer. We all get put in the meat grinder in this town, and you're no exception. And I'm sorry that that happened to you. I wish that had not happened. But for the sake of this room, the people who are in this room, this democracy, this country, all the people around the world are watching what you're saying, Sarah, and the White House for the United States of America, the President of the United States should not refer to us as the enemy of the people. His own daughter acknowledges that, and all I'm asking you to do, Sarah, is to acknowledge that right now and right here.
I appreciate your passion. I share it. I've addressed this question. I've addressed my personal feelings. I'm here to speak on behalf of the president. He's made his comments clear.
That's absolutely appropriate. Everything she said was absolutely appropriate.
Okay, so you know what I do. I not only analyze the news, but I give you the why of it, not just the what of it. And again, this is a post on BillO'Reilly.com if you want to read the whole thing. What Acosta is doing, in addition to pleasing his masters at CNN, and by the way, that's going to change once AT&T gets in there. because CNN's ratings are terrible and they're an embarrassment now.
Did you see the latest poll? This was actually posted just this week, and it's gotten very little play. That CNN is now the 9th trusted news source. The 9th.
Yeah, Trump has succeeded, and then CNN has helped them in demonizing the network. And I don't think that is a surprise. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Acosta, why is Acosta doing what he's doing? Well, he's following in the great tradition of Dan Rather and Richard Nixon and Sam Donaldson and Ronald Reagan. That's what Acosta is doing. Acosta knows that before Donald Trump, nobody knew who he was, wasn't making a lot of money. He was running around going nowhere. And he said, you know what, I really despise Donald Trump, and Acosta does personally. And so I'm going to make a career out of torturing him and haranguing his people. And therefore, that's going to catapult me onto the Glenn Beck program with Bill O'Reilly, and everyone will be talking about me. And my bosses will like that, so they'll give me more money. And since I despise Trump anyway, there's no downside for me. That's exactly what Jim Acosta is doing.
Could I give another version of that leads to the exact same place? He was a relative nobody. That nobody knew who he was. Sounds familiar, kind of like me. Relatively nobody knew who he was. But he actually believes this guy is a danger. And his bosses do too, and they let him go because they want to stop this trend of Donald Trump and what Donald Trump is doing. And so he just does it because he believes in his own mind, he's not doing it for money. He's doing it because he thinks it's the right thing to do.
Well, sure, and that's true. These zealots believe that Donald Trump is a danger to America, and therefore any vehicle that can diminish him or get him out of that office is legitimate, whether it's honest or not. That's true. They're true believers. Rather was a true believer. He hated Nixon. Mm-hmm. Donaldson was a true believer. He hated Reagan. I was there. I saw it. I saw it personally with my own eyes. Okay? So, yeah, that's fine. But there's supposed to be some kind of responsibility on the part of the press. And going in to try to embarrass on a daily basis a sitting administration with no intent of finding the truth about anything is corruption. It's simply corruption. And that's what you're seeing right before your eyes. You play that clip to Americans, the clip with Acosta and Sarah Sanders, and you do a poll on it. Sarah Sanders is going to win 70-30. You know, the 30 who hate Trump are going to side with Acosta. But rational, fair-minded people are going, the guy's out of line. She's under no mandate to give her opinion. And here's the final thing. Acosta doesn't care what Sarah Sanders thinks. Why would he care? Why would he care if Sarah Sanders thinks the press is the enemy of the people? I mean, he doesn't care. It's so hollow and phony. He's just using it as a staged mechanism to get himself on the Glenn Beck radio program.
So I doubt that's his goal. But let me switch topics, because one of the angles. One of the problems that I have, and I think the American people have, and we'll get into the New York Times debacle this week coming up in a second, but is the amazing lack of self-awareness that they are stirring the American people up using tactics that they said were terrifying, diabolical, and destructive to the state. That when Bill O'Reilly and Glenn Beck were on Fox News, we were a danger to the republic because of what we did in our 2 hours. And yet they're doing it 24/7, and they don't seem to recognize it. And stories like this are downplayed. Play the audio, please, Sarah, of the Representative Scalise, the guy who was shot by a leftist when they tried to kill 30% of our Congress. One guy, a Bernie Sanders volunteer, in 2017. He just had a new credible death threat. Listen to this.
You are taking ours. We are taking yours. Anytime, anywhere. We know where they are. We are not going to feed them sandwiches. We're going to feed them lead. Make no mistake, you will pay. Ojo por ojo, diente por diente. In Spanish, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is our law. We are the majority. Have a good day. Those voicemails were reported to the Capitol Police, and in each instance, the Capitol Police traced those phone calls and those voicemails to an individual identified as Carlos Bayonne, age 63, of Grand Island, New York. Mr. Bayonne has been charged in a criminal complaint here in the Western District of New York with interstate communication of a threat.
We'll get Bill O'Reilly's comment on that and the New York Times and the rest of the news of the week when we come back.
Glenn Beck.
So, Bill, last night I was having dinner with my kids, and we were talking about this thing with Steve Scalise, and I said, he's got another threat, and it's credible. And my adult children at the dinner table said to me, Dad, who's Steve again? And I said, the congressman that was shot. When was he shot? He was shot at the baseball diamond. What baseball diamond? The baseball diamond a year ago when they tried to kill 30% of what? 30% of Congress they tried to kill, and it was a guy who was a Bernie Sanders. In my family, my older children didn't know. Now they had heard about it, but they didn't really know what the story was back at the time. Just thought it was no big deal.
I'm not sure they thought it was no big deal. I just think there's so much chaos in this country now every day, and people forget because they're just overwhelmed. I don't know your kids, but it would seem to me that they were interested enough to ask you about it now.
Oh yeah, no, they were shocked last night that this wasn't known by them and everybody else, and was a very big deal. 30% of the Congress could have been killed.
Yeah, it was covered when it happened. I thought responsibly, but I just think we're in a society now where it's just one atrocity after another. And people are just overwhelmed. They can't retain. I mean, if you ask about mass shootings, you're not going to be able to get folks to say where they were. Maybe they'll remember the Florida one, but, the others they won't remember because it's just too much. We live in a real chaotic time.
So when we go to, I know you have security. I have security. We've had it for a while. We've had the left in organized campaigns try to and effectively get you out. They tried for a long time to destroy me, and you could make a good case that they did a pretty good job on both of us. They don't see that as a problem. Now it's happening to them, and they seem to think that is a problem.
Well, it's we're living in a time now where, because the press does not seek the truth about anything, that charlatans and dangerous organized zealots can level accusations, and corporations buckle because they don't want boycotts, they don't want sponsors this, they don't want bad Me Too publicity, whatever it may be. And everybody knows that. So it's a lot easier now than it was 3 years ago to destroy people. And every person I know, and I know them all, that gives opinion on television is in danger.
Yes. Yes, they are. We all are. All right. Bill O'Reilly. We'll come back with, I think, maybe the definition of racism first as we go to the New York Times story next.
Glenn Beck, Mercury. You're listening to the Glenn Beck Program.
We do have breaking news, something that is, I think, really important, and we're trying to get somebody who is actually on the scene before the end of the show today. Stu, do you have that news?
Yeah, Joe Paris at KTVP in Boise has this update for you, and I hope you're following this. About 100 goats are on the loose right now in a Boise neighborhood. They are going from house to house, eating everything in sight. Nobody has a clue where they came from. Updates to follow.
Okay, so we'll give you those updates as they. When he started in, he said, "Have you heard? There's 100 goats," and he could have said, "Glenn, there's breaking news. 100 goats have just been appointed as advisors to the 12 chairs of the Fed," and I would have been like, "Yeah, probably." That actually makes more sense than most of the news today. Bill, let's go to the woman who is now on the editorial board of the New York Times. I'm sure you've read the tweets that she wrote. She's Asian. She wrote them about white people and how she likes to make old white people uncomfortable. And, I think one of her hashtags was, what was it, white people die or something like that?
It's basically white men.
Yeah,
she doesn't like white men.
Yes. So racist? Are those tweets? Let me take this and break it down. Are those tweets racist?
Yes.
Why?
They target a group of people based on skin color.
Okay. Question 2, is she racist?
I don't know. People do this to curry favor and to get themselves attention, just like the Acosta thing we're talking about. It worked in her case. She's hired by the New York Times to be on the editorial board. So it worked.
Is the New York Times, by knowing that she had written these things, are they racist?
I never do that because I just think throwing that R word around
Good for you.
Is not what.
Good for you. You answered this. You answered those questions exactly the way I did. Last question.
Good.
Last question.
Yes.
Should the New York Times fire her?
Well, should they? They never should have hired her in the first place. They know who she is. They know. But again, let's go to the why. This is the O'Reilly formula on BillO'Reilly.com. The why behind it. Okay, so everybody who's sane is going, how could this happen? And this woman obviously is a hater. And how could she get this position at the New York Times? Well, if you know anything about that operation, you know their editorial philosophy is that white men have destroyed the country. That's white supremacy, white privilege.
May I go a step further? I said this morning that they're cut from the postmodernist cloth that says that the Judeo-Christian Western culture is the sickness that has swept the planet, and so anything that helped create that is bad.
Yeah, and who runs that culture?
Yes,
white men.
Right.
Okay, so if you look at their editorial policies, the New York Times wants open borders. They don't want any enforcement of immigration law. They want amnesty for everybody here. And if you show up and say, I need asylum, you get it. All right, so why do they want that? They know that already 20 million people have entered the country illegally, and they applaud the news that white people are now going to be a minority in the United States. The New York Times thinks that's great, all right, because the oppression brought by white people and Judeo-Christian culture must be obliterated. And the best way to obliterate it is to convince all Americans that white men are bad. And that's the philosophy of the paper.
The last piece here is we have suddenly gotten good at doing and turning the tables. We have suddenly gotten good at saying, oh, really? Well, two can play at that game. And there have been a lot of firings. However, there's also been a lot of firings on the other side. And it feels good to point out the hypocrisy of the New York Times, because if this would have been said about any other race by a white person, they would have been fired. And we all know it.
Sure, but the New York Times has shifted into we don't care what Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly and other white men think, because our audience is not that. We are marketing our newspaper to a sliver of the American people who think the way we do. We're not interested in covering the news or finding the truth about anything. We're interested in destroying the current fabric of the country, destroying the president, and getting in another Barack Obama. That's what we're interested in doing, and our readership will uphold it. Now, they're hemorrhaging money over there. Like the despicable New York Daily News, which is just about out of business now, the New York Times is in financial trouble because you can't really run an operation at that level by narrowcasting, which is what they're doing. But it is shocking that this kind of a person would be hired to be on the editorial board, and the paper would defend the person, which they did today.
So what do we? So I said today, first they came for, Kevin Williamson, and they didn't say anything because they weren't Kevin Williamson. We're living the Niemöller poem. I think we are starting to go down this really frightening road of a mob, and we've been going down it for a while. But now both sides are doing it, and it feels really good. But I made a pretty bold declaration in hour number 1 today. I am not going over the cliff with the rest of humanity, even though it feels really good. What should we be doing as people?
Well, I think the individual American is angry on both sides. So we have that anger, and you have it equally divided. I talked to Victor Davis Hanson yesterday, who's a very, very smart guy.
Yeah.
And that's posted on BillO'Reilly.com if you want to hear that. And he basically said, unlike the Vietnam War, which was maybe 65-35 against the government, most people stood with the government even though they didn't like the war. Now we have 50% of the people who are actively trying to undermine the government, and the other 50% saying that's wrong. So you really have a social civil war here. Now, as far as individuals are concerned, I always tell people you can't justify bad behavior by pointing to other bad behavior. So what you need to do is take the high road in whatever you do.
But people will say, we get our butt kicked. Then they just do what they want.
Well, no, you can expose it and you can challenge it, and it's effective to do that. I mean, why do they think they want to silence voices like mine and yours and other people in the media that go against the progressive movement? Because it is effective. I mean, people do step back and go, you know what? Do I really want a Stalinist society? Do I want a San Francisco telling me where I have to have lunch? Do I really want that? And the answer is no. So you can win the propaganda war in the sense that you can make a stronger case. But it's vicious. I mean, look, just compare Les Moonves to Roger Ailes.
Yeah.
Roger Ailes is dead because he was attacked ceaselessly, mercilessly, okay? And if you stack up allegations, Ailes versus Moonves, it's not even close. Yet Moonves still maintains his job as the head of CBS. I mean, if any fair-minded person just looked, one guy's dead, and the other guy's still doing a conference call on earnings.
Well, I will tell you this. I personally think CBS has been the most rational this week. It's the way Ailes and everybody else should have been dealt with, and that is, what are the facts, independent, and if it is a fair independent, they're listening truly to both sides.
I have no quibble with that.
Right.
Because due process has to be imposed.
Yes.
Okay? But it's not CBS that I'm criticizing. It's the coverage.
Yes.
It's the news coverage.
Yes.
Okay? So you get one thing is we're going to kill this man, Roger Ailes, and they did. He's dead. But the other guy, we'll criticize him with Me Too. We'll do that. But we're not going to attack his family. I mean,
it is the difference. It is the difference that the media is missing with the Trump coverage. You know, there are things to cover with Donald Trump that aren't good, but they cover absolutely everything like it is, you know, the Ebola virus.
And they don't cover anything that's positive.
Correct.
They don't cover the employment figures in the minority communities and how, you know, a lot of those neighborhoods are being revitalized because now there's work for people who want it. They don't cover that, all right, because that's not in their agenda. Their agenda is to get him out. Their agenda was to kill Fox News.
Okay, I'm going to run out of time here. I've got to ask you one more question, and that is on what's his face that's went to trial this week. What's his name? Manafort. I'm tired of the coverage of this. This is the Manafort story as I understand it and believe it to be. Manafort is a dirty, corrupt guy. He's been dirty and corrupt long before he met Donald Trump. His business dealings are shady. He has dealt with thugs, dictators, and killers. That has nothing to do with Donald Trump. He should most likely go to jail just on what I know, but I'll let a court decide. This is a reasonable trial, but it has nothing to do with collusion and Donald Trump. And that's not the story. The right is saying this guy should never be prosecuted, and the left is saying this proves Donald Trump, and neither of those are true.
Well, I haven't heard anybody on the right saying he hasn't been prosecuted. He shouldn't be prosecuted. I haven't heard that. Because the guy, if he is guilty of not paying taxes on $60 million, I mean, it's, shana na na, hey, 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 goodbye. I mean, that's just the way it is. But there is one element that does attach to Trump, and that's that. And the judge in the case pointed it out verbally. And he said, look, I know what this prosecution is about. It's about getting Manafort to say bad things about Trump for a lighter sentence. That's what it's about.
Right.
And so now the American people know what it's about.
Right. And that is a separate, we conflate everything. That's a separate issue. The guy is dirty, I think, and should go to jail just based on what I've covered this guy for a while. Before he joined Trump. When Trump picked him, I was like, no, really bad guy. So we knew who he was, and he should most likely go to jail if they can prove his guilt. However, that's a separate issue from they're just trying to squeeze him. Because the problem is he's not the only guy that's dirty. You got guys dirty on the Democratic side that are just as dirty as Manafort.
Sure. I mean, the lobbying thing is just as corrupt as it gets. Cohen's involved with that, too.
Yeah, well anyway. So is Podesta, who just walks out and closes his business so no questions are asked. Bill O'Reilly, thank you so much for being on the program.
I want to say one real quick thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to delay the release of Killing the SS because I don't want it to coincide with your book on September 18th.
Got to be kidding me. You are not going to believe this. We were talking about delaying the release just because. just because.
You know what? But there's another factor that we'll talk about, I hope, next week.
Okay.
And that's Bob Woodward.
Okay. Good.
Woodward as well. So what's the release date now, Bill?
I don't have a firm one, but I'm not going to compete with Beck on the same week. I told my publisher I don't want to do that.
Yeah, right.
No, I did.
Really? That is really kind of you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Is this the week that Bob Woodward's releasing his book?
September 11th, but the New York Times will put it at number one no matter what.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it.
Okay, guys.
All right.